It's a Friday and welcome to K24 this morning. My name is Jeff Mott. Of course, even as you wind the week, same stories we speak about right here on the show. Thanks for making time to be part of it. You can get me on Twitter, by the way, at I am Jeff Motte or at K24 TV. Now, as the country settles into the year 2021 and activities across all spheres of life pick up momentum, there's no denying the government's in-tray is filled to the brim. Dealing with a pandemic that has ravaged the economy, education and healthcare sectors, and a political mood at the blocks for a referendum race, we ask, what is the key decision that the government has to make and the key priority for this government? It's a state of the nation that we're talking about on K24 this morning, but as always first, the newspaper headlines. Okay, let's see what we have on the front page of the PD. It's all about matters. Justice tasked to select next CJ starts. As you can see right there, members of the JSC meeting to discuss this. JSC meets to begin journey of replacing retired CJ David Maraga with debate on who will succeed him getting louder. This is a story you can find on page 4. And of course, even as we look forward as to who will be getting to the office, people are also reflecting on the tenure of CJ Maraga and what characterized the relationship between the judiciary and the executive. You can find the story on page 4 of your People Daily right there. As you look at that, right next to it on the front page of the PD, on page 6, if you dig deeper into the paper, Raila to take BBI to people after scare on his popularity. Of course, this scare in reference to the letter by Senator Kangata on that particular issue, and they will take no chances as far as that's concerned. You can find that story on page 6 of your PD. Let's get to the top of the paper and see what's right at the top right there. It's all about what's happening across the border. Uganda votes in a tense election. Electors went to the ballot under heavy security, internet blackout as Museveni's sixth term as the president, been in power for 35 years. Does he get another presidential term? And if he does, essentially, by the end of that term, he'll be 81 years old. That story is on page 8 and 9 of your People Daily this morning. Right next to it, 140 years for rapist father. A Korean pastor who defiled and impregnated his 2 daughters to spend over a century behind bars. That story can be found on page 2 of your People Daily. And even if you haven't gotten yourself a copy of your PD, you don't need to leave your office or your home to go to your vendor. You can get it straight to your phone. The number that you dial is star 550 star 4 hash. Once again, it's star 550 star 4 hash. Dial it and get yourself a copy of your PD. It's all courtesy of the People Daily and Safaricom. Let's move it right along, see what the Standard has for us this morning. Same story right there. CJ Maraga's bombshell. Former CJ opens up on key moments of his tenure as head of judiciary, intrigues of the 2017 petition that annulled presidential vote, and why he thinks there are enough reasons for impeachment of President Uhuru. This story can be found on page 2, 3, and 4 of your Standard this morning, as you can see right there. And a quote from retired CJ as they bring that story to you. We are a constitutional democracy governed by the rule of law. Sadly, the president who derives his power from the very constitution he is violating is not leading by example. If he was in another region, he would be impeached because he has disregarded the constitution. So as you can see right there, really no love lost between the CJ as far as that's concerned, leading the judiciary and the executive. You can find that story once again on page 2, 3, and 4 of your Standard. On the other side, of course, as we look into matters sport, as we get into the weekend, how Kenyan stars have made strong comebacks. Let's not forget, this is an Olympic year, fingers crossed on that. And as we get closer to the Olympics, these are the stars we'll be looking at. Right there, picture of David Rudisha. Does he defend his medal and his world record? You can find that story on page 46 and 47 of your Standard this morning. Daily Nation now. The cash bombshell. The government is running on empty and unable to disburse funds to counties, according to a letter from CS Ukuri, attorney to all 47 bosses of devolved units, in which he blames COVID-19 for the state of affairs, pleads with them to bear the situation, and advises them to draw emergency funds from a central bank account. This story is on page 4 of your Daily Nation. You can get the details of that therein. Even as you look at that, right next to it on the front page, Ruto and Raila battle it out for Mount Kenya vote. Find that story as well on page 7 of your Daily Nation. And right at the bottom, of course, some pictures from the Ugandan polls taking place as Uganda votes and as they decide. You can find that story as well in your copy of your Daily Nation this morning. Let's look at the Star now. Signs Raila will run for president in 2022. Former PM says claims he is unwelcome in Kikuyu land, unfounded propaganda. That story can be found on page 4 and 5. He was in Kiambu yesterday, and of course his remarks made at that particular point in time. You can find that story in detail therein. And finally, let's look at the front page of the Business Daily. It all matters economy. Health insurers in record 891 million shilling profit on COVID-19. So some prospered during the pandemic, and this industry was one of them. A sharp drop in hospital spending has benefited insurance firms that had previously been weighed down by healthcare claims. You can find that story and much more, of course, in your copy of your Business Daily this morning. So as you can see that right there, this news coming in yesterday for all of those who are either motorists or for those who might be moving around. Fuel costs climb puts pressure on farmers as well, because as we know, when the price of petrol goes up, the general cost of living also is pushed up because of that. You can find that story as well in your copy of your Business Daily this morning. So as you wake up, those are the stories and those are the headlines that you're waking up to. But right here on the show, it's all about the state of the nation. We reflect where we are at this particular point in time. Some very grim news coming from CS Ukuri Atani as far as the economy is concerned. How do we pick up the pieces and move forward from there? That also makes part of the conversation this morning. Welcome to your newspaper review on K24 this morning. Of course, as always, we love it when you're part of the conversation. You can get me on Twitter at @IamJeffMote or at K24TV. Let me get to my panel in studio as we get into this particular conversation on the state of the nation. In studio, something I discovered yesterday. A man of many talents, advocate of the High Court, and also when he's not in the court, you might find him in front of a choir near you. Dennis Anyoka, karibu sana. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Asante sana for making time.
And it's good to know that we all have talents.
Right.
Of our professional life.
True.
I'm a very serious choral trainer and singer.
Right. I did not know that.
I'll invite you next time I'm doing that.
Please. Asante sana, Dennis, for making time to be on the show. For the first time on the show this morning, Leader Mathia. She is the founder of the Daughters of the Mountain. Karibu sana, Lydia. Welcome to the show. Asante sana, and thanks for making time.
Thank you for having me.
Happy New Year. It's still in order, or are we too late?
Oh, yeah, we are within the window.
Okay,
Happy
fantastic
New Year.
stuff. Happy New Year to you, Lydia.
Yeah.
Later on, we'll be joined via Skype by Gerotich Sei, as well as we discuss this particular issues. I want us to just take a cursory look on what we're having on our dailies on the front pages before we get to the main stay of our conversation. As we look for the next CJ, and on the Standard's front page, you're talking about former CJ Maraga, speaking about the fact that if it was really going to go down the impeachment road, it's a president who should be impeached. Dennis, is this a political statement that he's making, or is he speaking from the point of view of a judicial officer who's looking at what has happened to the law and thinks that this president deserves to go down the impeachment road?
Jeff, if you were to look at the former Chief Justice, Maraga, and look at his track record in terms of his pronouncements and how he has lived his life as a judicial officer and as a Chief Justice, you'll agree that he has been very consistent. He's one man who has not shied off from speaking his opinion and particularly making reference to what the Constitution requires. There have been a few issues that have come out very clearly to show that the president has not complied with the law. You remember towards, I think, sometime last year, the Chief Justice gave an advisory that Parliament should be dissolved. That has not happened. And in his opinion, it was detailed. The reasons, the constitutional reasons, and the provisions of the law that allowed that to happen. The president did not dissolve Parliament. We have had many instances, pronouncements in court on actions the president should be taking, could have taken steps, but he has not done, one of them being the appointment of judges. So really, if indeed our systems were to work as they ought to, constitutionally, then the president should have been impeached.
Right.
So I don't think Maraga is making a political statement. If he were to attempt politics, we would make a very poor politician, because he doesn't lie much. So he will not succeed in Kenyan politics.
Lydia, let me come to you on this one, because right before CJ made his statement, when we were talking about impeachment, it was in the political realm, and it was the DP whose guns had been focused on as far as that's concerned. When the CJ makes such a remark, what's your reaction to that? Former CJ, rather.
I think the former CJ, and I think some of us are very happy that he has retired, has always been, I think, on the radical side of things. And he's, I believe even the nullification of the elections that time, when he said the process is more important than the outcome, I think he should be very grateful that he made that decision when we had a president who could take it, who was tolerant enough to endure, the second election and not take this country, down a bad rabbit hole. And so it's very consistent of the CJ to continue to make these, grandiose statements for his own profile, or so he can look very bold and very radical. But I think a person of the stature of a Chief Justice needs to consider not just perhaps the facts, but also the implications of what he's talking about.
Right.
We are 2 years to an election. When he says that a president should be impeached, in what kind of a scenario does he want to place this country?
Right.
So it's consistent with his persona. It's consistent with what he has been doing to this country since 2017. We are not surprised, but he is utterly wrong. And I think we are grateful that he's no longer the Chief Justice.
The pushback on that, Lydia, might be the fact that even as he nullified the election, there was a promise to revisit the judiciary. And after that, you've had a CJ who's been hard-pressed, telling the public, I'm trying to see my boss, the president. I can't get a hold of him. We still have judges who've never been brought into or onto the bench at this particular point in time. And some people might say, well, the revisit did happen, and there's some grounds for the CJ saying.
Well, he can interpret it as a revisit, but I believe that the state moved forward, but he was stuck in the moment. So he read everything as part of his decision, and perhaps that betrays a guilty conscience on his part, because the state, and I think a person of the president's level, cannot indulge himself. And I think he also spoke about the fact that after the nullification, there was a function, I think a soldier function, where he invited the president and the president showed up. So I think there was a fundamental philosophical departure between how the Chief Justice thinks and how other people think a state should be run. Because all these people are state officers. They are supposed to care about the stability of the state. They all have a duty of care beyond just, the mechanics of the offices that they hold.
Right.
And I think that's where the dichotomy is. The CJ thinks that you can just, run roughshod and stick by certain parameters, whereas we know that it's never black and white. Running a nation, keeping a state together is much more complicated. And so I think for us, we are grateful that Maraga existed when the president was a magnanimous president. If it was a different president, I think this country would be in a very, very different situation. Dennis,
I know you want to react to that. Is it that the CJ got lost in the nuances of statecraft? He couldn't understand that some things aren't, cut and dry when you're running a country?
I don't think so, Jeff. We all as a country need to, examine ourselves and ask whether we want to be governed by the constitution we passed, the laws that have been passed, and give every institution its time to work. The most difficult thing that happened in the judiciary during Maraga's time is that the executive wanted to usurp the functionalities of the judiciary. They do not want it to be fully operationalized. You remember, for the longest time, there's been a quarrel on the 1.5, the judiciary fund, that percent of the audit accounts that needed to have been operationalized. The rules were never made. The executive chose not to give funds as and when required. And these were the issues that were being pushed, by the Maraga and the entire judiciary to try and get itself functional. Yet for 3 years or so, we've not had a hearing of magistrates. We have magistrates who have retired. We have magistrates who have been, who have died. We have magistrates who have been sacked, and others have been suspended. So we want justice to run, but the executive cannot operationalize this. Those are some of the issues that really we saw coming out. Some other things, and why I think Maraga is right, and if you ask me as a practitioner of law, I'll tell you that if I were to have a platform, I'll tell you, yes, we have had a president. I think Moi was bad, but this Uhuru is worse in terms of complying with the law itself. Because, during Moi's time, we didn't have this kind of constitution. We did not have, there could be things that will have gray areas. You will say, the law does not provide for this, therefore the president has made a decision. But we are looking at a time when, post-2010, when we passed the constitution, with a lot of clarity on a few things, a lot of clarity on the kind of powers the president should be able to wield, with a lot of clarity on the mode of operations of various institutions. And when you find a head of state who should be living by example, who, for example, has been advised by the judiciary, the courts which have the mandate to interpret the law, and I'm telling you, we have looked at the Constitution and the laws, and your mandate upon appointment or clearance by Judicial Service Commission is for you to appoint these people because that is your mandate. Then you choose not to do it. Really, you are supposed to, that is the oath you took with office, to uphold the Constitution. You are not upholding it. What else can any Kenyan talk about? Tell you, the only other way to remove you from office, because you can't live by the Constitution, you want more powers than you have, is by being impeached. And that can only happen, of course, if our system's working. Unfortunately, in Kenya, Parliament will not even initiate the process. And if they do, we will shift very quickly our gears between Tangatanga and Kieleweke. It will not be objectivity of whether the president has acted unconstitutionally and illegally.
Clearly, I've opened a kind of worms here as far as it's concerned. But I want to come back to you very quickly, Lydia, as we wrap this particular issue up and move it forward. Yeah. Because one glaring issue that many Kenyans look at it is the fact that we've been waiting for these judges to be appointed. The debate was, there was some issue that had come in, intelligence gave information, and that being as it may, it's taken forever to get these judges back in office. What's your take on that? Because the president knows, the CJ has asked, the judges have asked, yet nothing is done there.
I think we have a very narrow interpretation of what the president is, and we try to imagine that for some reason that just because the law says he should appoint, that he has to just appoint. He has bigger responsibilities. He has to think about the unity of this country. He has to think about the integrity. He has to defend the Constitution. When he sees a list of judges and he's told these judges have these issues by the National Intelligence Service, it is also his responsibility to protect this country from having those kinds of judges running, the High Court or the Court the Court of Appeal. And so, while others might think that he's defying the Constitution, I see it as him defending the Constitution, which he took an oath to defend. And so I think the honorable thing for the Judicial Service Commission to have done is to take back their list and say, okay, there are some issues that have been raised about these people. Let us go and revisit. Let us do another set of interviews. Let us send over to the president. And I think if they had engaged in that kind of productive manner, we would have moved forward. But they are there being obstinate that, sisi tumekutumia majina, you appoint, we don't care. But the president is like, oh hell no. I have a constitutional mandate to defend the Constitution. And the Constitution talks about the principles of governance. It talks about the values that we hold as a country. There is no way he can do it when he knows what he knows. And we have to respect that. So I think the way the judiciary and the tone and their disposition and how they were choosing to engage with the executive is what was detrimental. I would have gone back, if I was in the JSC, I would have gone back, revisited the list and submitted a fresh panel for consideration.
But I said I'd close it, but just as we probe this a bit deeper. Because when you look at where it stands in terms of the relationship between the executive and the judiciary, many people are seeing this relationship as very strained, and that's dangerous for any country. You'd want a part where one of them becomes the bigger person, calls this relationship to order, and mends this fence, whatever the problem is. We're not seeing that.
Actually, if you ask me, the president has been the bigger person. He has been the bigger person the entire period. It is I think the leadership of the judiciary that has refused to rise to the stature of the state office that is the Chief Justice's office. And what we are hoping for then is that with the new recruitment, we will get somebody who understands their responsibility not just to the judiciary, but to the state as state officers. And I think once we have a philosophical alignment at that level, where there's that understanding, then I think you'll begin to see, a lot of that, those issues decimate and get resolved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dennis, very quickly, let's wrap it up. A minute on that.
Yes. Just very briefly that I want just to mention this issue about the appointment of judges. This issue has been litigated upon, and the excuse by the president and the executive that they cannot appoint because they are upholding the Constitution and they have information they know. If any information existed as against any of the appointed judges, the judges whose names were forwarded to the president, that information could have been placed before the Judicial Service Commission at the point of interview. And I think the JSC, through the then chair, the former Chief Justice, explained that they asked for this information. Said, okay, very well, you are saying you have issues against this or the other judge, present the information. Let us examine it, because the mandate even to examine what integrity issues arise and what you are raising falls squarely within Judicial Service Commission. And it's not because one has alleged that the judge is corrupt, it does not mean necessarily that the judge is corrupt. So present the evidence, present the issues. A lot of people will not agree with judges and magistrates because finally they know the decisions made will please one or the other. So it's possible that for any judicial officer to find themselves in a place where they are not loved by anybody. But that information has never been placed before JSC. And this information was litigated. In fact, the issue went to court. I think LSK moved to court to force the president to appoint, and they also examined, because there were questions as to whether what my colleague here is saying, whether the president's role in appointment is simply to sign or he has any further role within the context of the Constitution. And this was examined, that every other role in terms of vetting, in terms of all these things, should be done by JSC. That is why we have an entire board. Otherwise, we will not need it. If we needed the president to examine whether a person has integrity or not, then we don't need JSC. He has no role to do it. We can't have double processes. You go through a process in one area, then there's another area where the same issues are presented. You have no right to appear before the president to explain yourself. That doesn't work. We need to agree as a country that we need to live by our constitutional values, by the laws that we have passed, so that we keep moving forward as a country which respects institutions, where people can get what they deserve because the rules allow them to get that.
Okay, we'll have to move on this one, because clearly it's already in the court of public opinion, and this is definitely a developing story from that particular interview, and we'll be having much conversation on that. I want us to move it forward to, the state of economy and the state of the nation and where we stand with this. Front page of the Daily Nation, very grim, statement coming from the CS when he's telling all county chiefs, need to go and draw emergency funds. We are broke at this particular point in time. Lydia, are we having our priorities right? Because for very many people, what they're hearing is a clamor for BBI. We need to popularize this particular document, but businesses are hurting, jobs are being lost, people don't know if their children will, make it back to school. There are all of these uncertainties. What's on the government's entry from your perspective? What are they putting on top of the agenda right now?
So first of all, the issue of economic hardship is a universal problem. This is a crisis that the entire world is grappling with. And I think you've seen a lot of empathy, even from developing nations, where there are loans and they're able to say, what, it's okay, hold on to the money that you have and continue to do those things. Remember also last year, the president, all the way from April up to, I think, December, gave a lot of relief on pay-as-you-earn, on taxes that are supposed to be submitted by companies. And that freed up a lot of money for Kenyans to use, and have purchasing power for so many things. So I think then this is the moment where now we have to transition now into a point of record. So now we enjoyed all those benefits. Now it's time to tighten our belts so that we can recover properly post-COVID. So I don't think it's something that is unique to our country. It's not something that we need to be too worried about. I believe that the fundamentals of our economy are solid and we'll be able to navigate forward. Now, the mixing up of this with the BBI, I think, is fallacious because it doesn't mean that we cannot walk and chew gum, at the same exact time. And also remember that BBI is trying to solve this issue where we have a start-stop economic kind of a disposition, where the country is running, the economy is growing 6%, 7% for 2-3 years, and then as we approach elections, everybody pulls back, investors pull back, everybody quietens down, and for about a year or 2 years, we've got this stagnation of the economy. And that really is what jeopardizes our growth, because if we could maintain a consistent economic growth, 6% throughout election season, election year, the next year, then we wouldn't have this start-stop. Right. And I think then if we view BBI as the long-term solution to that problem, then we begin to see that the cost of bringing BBI about is literally negligible vis-a-vis the economic benefit long-term, 10 years, 20 years, when we have that guaranteed stability. Okay.
Dennis, I'll come to you on this one as well. What's, in your view, the government's priority right now? Because there are very many issues. We have, the economy as one, doctors who have gone on industrial action and been sacked as well, nurses following suit on that particular front, children back in school. From where you stand, what are you saying is the government's key priority as they move forward?
I think my view about this government has been consistent in terms of their priorities. They have always gotten it wrong. In the sense that if you look at Kibaki, the former President Kibaki, how he identified the economic stimulators and really how he moved the country forward, he was able to look at the industrialization and ensure that We had several of those industries back into place. It was making programs to ensure that that is the time I think Kenya Meat Commission was brought back into full, some level of operationalization. KCC was brought back. Kenya is an agrarian economy. But this government does nothing to actually ensure that particular economy is tapped. There is a lot of support so that we are able to move the next level of production. Kenya depends almost entirely on heavy taxation on citizens and donations and loans. That will not go anywhere. As soon as the coffers are dry, they are hoping that they have reinstated the taxation back to what we used to have. But from which businesses? Businesses are closing down. You have people who have been sacked. So who is working to give you the money? What mechanism has the government put in place to ensure that those basic, structures that support the economic growth are in place? Whether you are fighting, whatever happens, we are producing, items. We have tapped our ICT very well, so that we are able to even attract, other people to come and invest. We don't have that, so we are on our own as a country. I think, if you ask me, the kind of push that the government has had, the areas that it has focused on, is really not going to help the country in terms of moving forward. For me, BBI is a good idea, but the solution provided in BBI, there's a disconnect between the whole concept in terms of what BBI intended to achieve and how they are proposing to solve the problem through BBI. In the net effect, we are spending a lot of energy when the real issues have not been addressed.
Okay, that actually brings us to even our first break right here on the show as well. As always, we love it when you're part of the conversation. You can get me, of course, at I am Jeff Mote. Some tweets coming in. Let me look at them very quickly before we get to the break. We have Peter Nzuku who's saying, right now all politicians are just trying to get their support base in order. Sisi wa Kenya ni Mungu. Hashtag K24 this morning. Weritab Kimarasogek saying, this is the problem right now. Everyone talking about BBI. If one of the B's stood for business, I think there'd be a great change in the economy. But right now it's all about politicians at this particular point. Let's see who else is in there. There's one who's saying, loving the conversation going on. Hashtag K24 this morning. Let's interrogate at the beginning of the year and then give a report at the end. Okay, Jewish, we'll do exactly that. It also brings us to our first break on the show. Of course, keep those tweets coming in. We'll look at that. After the break, of course, we still speak about the economy, speak about healthcare, education as we get into the year proper. This is K24 this morning. Don't go too far.